Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today, as of this video dropping, is the release of the second set for the One Piece card game, Paramount War, assuming you can find it at a reasonable price. And with it, I wanted to make a video going over all of my favorite leaders with deck list for the second set. I did a couple videos going over some of these, but I just wanted to do all of them going up to the set, and I just didn't find enough time with being on the road as much as I was, and I just want to drop them all here so you guys had a good resource getting into this set as well. So I also did make a tier list going over my thoughts on what I think is going to be good in the next couple of weeks, and obviously we do have some tournaments that I will hopefully be covering as well once I get that data, and I'm really looking forward to it. So let's start off with our first deck, our favorite set 2 leader, Zoro. All right, I know that Zoro is not a set 2 leader, but I did want to talk about him real briefly because I think he's going to be one of, if not the most popular leader going into this set. He's very strong with all of the new red cards that we get. He was already a fan favorite from set 1, even though Luffy was better back then, and so I think he gets a lot of buffs from here. And in general, if you need to have a deck that has at least an okay matchup against Zoro, because there's no way you're going through a tournament without having 1 or 2 games against Zoro, because he's really strong, he's very powerful, and I think he's also just a good deck for people picking up the game. And so I think he's going to be very strong in that regard. So here's an easy, simple sample list. I don't really like Zoro. He's not very my play style, so I'm not playing with him a lot. But here is something I think if you want an example deck list just to get into it, or at least to know what to test against, I think this is a pretty good start for it. So the big buffs that he gets here is that there's kind of like this archetype revolving around the 1-drop red cards. So Curly Dedan is a very strong card, looks at the top 5 for a red character card with a cost of 1 or less, which means you can find your Namis and your Otamas, which are already 2 of the strongest red cards in the game right now. You have a new 2K as well, Makino, which can give a boost of plus 3K. Magra is also very good, being able to give something plus 3K that has a cost of 1, which means your Nami becomes a 5K. 6K with Zoro effect. We have Gordon as well, who gets a minus 3K, which pairs up very good with the Nico Robin that people are running already, but also the new Vista card. This card is absurd. It's such a good card, being able to KO something 3K power less on a body, especially when it's a 4K body in Zoro too. Very, very strong there. Obviously, you can pair them up with the Otama or the Gordon, which also pair up with the Jet Pistol, and just kind of everything else. We do also have the new Edward Newgate card, which we'll talk about with the Edward Newgate leader, which happens right about now. All right, so into Edward Newgate. I will say, getting into this section too, I did make a video going over him, and I will say that the deck list that I put at the end of that video were okay, but they weren't great. I didn't do as much testing as I have to this point. I've done a lot more testing with Edward Newgate, and I was really on the fence on the Moby deck version, and it's good. It's a very good build, and I've been trying it a lot more, and I've been really enjoying it. So this is one of my best builds with it right now. So don't watch the other video. I'll post a comment like, hey, the analysis is good, but the deck list is over here instead. So the big deal with this guy, though, is that it's a stage. It's pretty cheap to get out to, just for 2. Also has a trigger that you get to play. Not that Newgate lets you trigger a lot, because he is a 6K leader, in case you haven't noticed that already. He also has 6 life, but you have to take a life at the end of each of your turns, which a lot of people are going to miss the trigger moving forward. Don't call them a cheater, just remind them of them, be nice. But the Moby Dick stage just lets you get plus 2K power as long as you have 1 or less life cards, which means on your turn, your leader becomes 8K, which is really, really strong as a swing. And then all your other cards get the buff as well. So you kind of go there, you play a lot of the cards. Most of the cards are just Whitebeard Pirates, just because it's generically good archetype. So from a deck building, obviously you just play the Whitebeard cards. But we have Otama, we have Tony Chopper. We have the Vanillas, which are fine for what they are. Again, like a 5-drop 7 people are playing already. It's very good. 4-drop 6 is good. Especially this becomes an 8K, this becomes a 9K, which... Again, it's just very hard to stop these attacks or get out of them in the late game, too, if you just have like 3 or 4 big ones. Ace is a good card to also be a finisher as well. 7 Dawn is quite a bit for something with Rush, so you do have to be a bit wary of that. But it gives stuff minus 3K, so you can pair it up with Ace and a Vista and get rid of something 6K, and also have a 7K swing, which also becomes a 9K swing if you have a Moby Dick under there. Edward Newgate as well. I will say you do not have to run this card. This is not a requirement for it. I know it's like the card for the leader for the deck, but it's just okay. Like 9 Dawn's actually asking for a lot for what this effect is. And when you play him, you normally only have like 1 life anyways left. So like it doesn't do a lot for what it is. It does give you the plus 2k, so you become an 8k leader on your opponent's turn, which means you are really tough to get out of, and you do just establish a 10k body. But I've also played builds with this not in the deck, and it's done very well as well. So if you don't have this card and you want to make like a budget version, because again, prices for cards are really expensive right now, do not feel forced to play Edward Newgate at all. You can run it budget without it. I recommend trying that as well in case you need to know if you like the deck before you invest more time into it. Ace also is really nice, but you don't need to have him either. You can even just run Rush Luffy from the star decks if you have that. But I think the rest of this is pretty obtainable as a deck too. Seaquake's nice too, just a Vista on an event card too, and then you just have a bunch of additional event cards to make it so it's really hard to get, even though you're only going to be at like 1 or 0 life, you can just use a Radical Beam or Guard Point and you get out of the attack and you're going to be fine. So also last thing, Marco's a really good blocker. Marco's really, really good. So he's just very strong. But again, if you want to run the budget version, you do not need these super rares. Do not think you need to spend the money on aces or Newgates. You can actually build this just like this, have some more event cards, and I think you'd actually be in a pretty good spot as well. So don't feel forced to do that as well. But I think Newgate's probably better than I originally said in my tier list video, so don't go off that. I think I already pinned a comment by then, by this video release, saying that you should probably play this a little bit more than I was suggesting. And it's really neat. It's a very neat leader. It's really neat to have something like this in set 2 already. I think it's very fun. So that is there. And next up we have Emporio, one of my favorite characters from this set. And this is a very weird deck too. Like they just have all these weird effects, and I'm all on board for it. There are a lot of fun things. So Emporio is like, you know how you have to stack your deck for Dofi to make sure that you have the right place to do the right things. This is that deck, but like a little bit more on that grind. So Emporio, if you don't know what it does, it just says if you have 0 cards in hand, you get to draw 2. Very strong effect. Like kind of like the fact that you get to draw 2 cards is good. The fact that you're going to have like a max hand size of like 2 is kind of bad, but like also weirdly okay. It's a very weird deck. You need to play it like a couple times just to know how the deck works itself. But in general, what you want to do is you want to be very greedy early game. You want to counter out of all the attacks, make sure you're at 5 life, and try to build a board, which is quite easy to do. I'm on board for the new Comma Land also. Not everyone thinks this is a good card, and so you don't have to run this card, but I think it's something that you want to do. It says you may rest the stage if your leader is Emporio, draw 1 card, then trash 1 card from your hand, then trash up to 3 cards from your hand. So you can discard up to 4, which sounds bad in like literally any other deck, but in this deck, it's actually really nice in a lot of ways. And the fact that you get to draw, like, draw is so rare in this game, right? And you can set the top cards of your deck with Don Quixote del Flamingo. Also, if you want to play the 1-drop that does the same thing, you can. But this is just fantastic. You can see top 5 cards of your deck if you need to know what you're drawing next with the new Comma Land. That's really important. It also helps you set up like the 2 cards you draw at the end of the turn if you need to as well, because you need to make sure you have those 2Ks in hand sometimes and make sure you have enough counter power for what you're doing. But this deck also has like an inherent amount of blockers that are really good. It has Mr. 3, which lets you restand at the end of turn. You have to trash a card to do that, and it's very easy. You get to choose the ordering. So you can just, if you have 1 card in hand, you can discard with Mr. 3, restand, and then draw 2 with Emporio. Or if you have 0 cards in hand, you can draw 2 and then discard 1 with Mr. 3. Whatever makes more sense and helps you out, so you can do that. Also, Inazuma, 2K or 5K with blocker, but also if you have 1 or less card in hand, it becomes a 7K just as a permanent. So like this is on both players' turns. So that's pretty strong in its own right too. So you can be offensive or defensive. And I think that's kind of like the main thing. Oh, of course. What am I saying? We do have the 7-drop. So this is kind of like the good card in the deck. So on play, draw until you have 3 cards in hand, and then play 1 blue Impel down character with cost of 6 or less from your hand. So we do have a lot of targets for that. Obviously, these 4-drops, the Bon Clay 2K counter, but also the Crocodile, and most importantly, the Monkey D. Luffy. So on player, when attacking, you may trash 2 cards from your hand, return up to 1 4-cost or lower card to its hand. This character gets double attack for the turn. So being able to do this in what you can do, also making sure that you use Don Quixote del Flamingo to set up the top cards of your deck, is that you play this, you drop to 3, 1 of the cards is Luffy, you play the Luffy, you discard the other 2 cards in your hand, which means you're going to have 0 cards in hand, which means at the end of the turn you get to 2 more cards with the Emporio. So there's obviously a lot of sequencing you have to do. There's a lot of manipulating the top cards of your deck so you know what you're drawing in at the right time. It's a really, really fun deck. You do have to do a lot of testing with it because of that too. I don't know if this is a deck that I can run for 8 rounds and be perfect with it, and that's kind of what you got to do to have a shot at this topping, but it's very fun. I like the deck, and if your opponent doesn't know what this does, which is quite likely because it's a weird deck, you're probably going to do kind of well with it. So that is Emporio there. I like the deck. Definitely try it out if you can. I think it's a fun one. So next up we have Kinemon, probably one of the decks that people are looking forward to. Green's been very good, and spoilers, I don't think Useless Kid is going anywhere, by the way. I think that deck can just pretty much be a set 1 deck and still do very well, so do be wary of that. But Kinemon is very interesting for what it does. It has a lot of strong plays. Specifically, it has this activate main when once return one of your characters, when you have 1 or less characters, in play, reduce the play cost of your next 3 or higher Wano Country card character by 1. So guess what? If you go second, you have 2 Dawn, you can say, I have 0 cards. I will play Okiku on turn 1. That's very strong because guess what? Every character your opponent's playing right now is probably going to have a cost of 5 or less. So, like, it's very good. Like, that's obviously very strong. You can also do the same for Izo to be like a budget version of Cat Viper if you need it. You can do it with Raizo as well, which means that you can play it, and the next turn you can play Momo, draw a card, and attack with Raizo and draw a card, and just kind of everything else with it. We do have some new cards in this set. Not a lot, honestly, that are worth it, but the ones that are kind of meant to be is that the Yamato. This is also an Odin, but also rest up to 1 of your characters with a cost of 6 or less. So that's very, very strong. So again, this can cost 3 with their leader effect, and then you can rest something and then attack into it. So very strong there. And it's a 6k body, which is great. And then also the 8-drop Odin. This card's pretty dumb for what it is. So activate main once per turn for 3. You can set this card to active, and then also on KO, play up to 1 Wano Country card with a cost of 3 from your deck, then shuffle it. So this is a really good card to find. I think this card like makes it better for Momo. Most of the time there weren't a lot of good hits with it, but the Yamato and the Odin are both great hits that you can find and you want to find with this. Honestly, Bonnie at 4 might be a mistake, but I'm going to keep it there for right now. Being able to find Momo, and then also we're playing just the 7-drop kid just because most of the time I just didn't find like I had enough time to play the 8-drop. And even though you're more offensive than defensive, I do like the 8-drop in here, Odin, a lot more. And if you have 10 Dawn, you can use the Odin effect to for 3 restand it, attack again, and then you'll still have 7 to play the captain kid. So all of that's pretty good. I think that's strong. And the only thing that like I'm missing, like, if it was very weird to play a green deck that I don't get to like attack twice with the leader, so you do have to be careful on that. And it does play a little bit different, a little bit more value and for it, because this lets you attack twice, which means that you're using your Dawn to get another attack for 8. So I think that's strong too. Paradise Waterfall at 3 because it's very good to restand your cards after you attack with them for value as well, and you can get out of attacks and just do some silly things. So in general, I think a deck like this is very strong. I think a lot of people are going to be playing Kinemon. I don't know if it's going to be better than Kid in set 2, which is kind of sad if that's the case, but I think this card is really neat. I think the whole archetype's great, and it's cool to have like a better Wano Country leader, so we're going to see how that goes. But this is my example deck. Let me know what you guys think about it. Next up, we have Z, and this is pretty much the exact same list that I went over in my video going over Z, and it's also Zephyr, which it's either or. I'm probably going to say Z, but also when I say Z deck, that means something in Dragon Ball Super, so maybe I should just say Zephyr. Whatever you say, I think he's very neat for what he is, and the only thing that I don't like about him is that he probably has like a really losing match, like a 30-70 win rate to 30 to 70% chance to win against Zoro, which is a real shame. That's a real shame for this deck because it's very cool and very fun otherwise. So in case you don't know how this one is built and what the idea for it is, first, leader says when attacking for Dawn -4 KO up to one of your opponent's characters cost of 3 or less, and this gets plus 1k power during this turn. So that's pretty strong for what it is. And so the kind of idea is that you want to get to 10 Dawn as quick as possible, and by quick as possible I mean as healthy as possible. You play your Kuzan pops something, and then with the Kuzan effect. Active, which means you give everything on the board -5 to their cost. You can play, you can attack with your Z, and then you can pop something that's 8 cost or less. So that's very strong as well. So you get 2 attacks, or 2 cards gone. You get to do this attack with it, and then every turn you can KO something with cost of 8 or less with this Kuzan and Z effect, both active. So you do have to go -4 Dawn, which means that every turn you start with 2 less Dawn because you get 2 back every time. But it's very good. If you're able to get to it and you're able to see your Kuzan on curve, it's very good. You do have to be careful that like you don't see other Kuzans, but you do also have some ways to like discard cards a little bit. Actually, not in this. Yeah, a little bit, but just kind of like ramping up. So if you see the Kuzans early, then that's what you do. To kind of get you there, we do have like the 4-drop Kuzan, which lets you draw a card, which is fantastic in this game. When this attacking, give it to one of your opponent's characters -4 during this turn, which means that you can do some silly things, including pop a 7 cost or less. If you're not finding your 10-drop Kuzan early enough, this can help you get some board control. Borsalino is very, very good as a blocker. It's a 6k in your opponent's turn, and it can't be KO'd by skills. And it's a 1k counter too, like it has it all. It's great. Hino's just a good backup blocker too. And then traditionally you want to go first in this deck, and the reason you do that is that on turn 3 you use either Sasaki or you use Jack to get the ramp up by 1, and then once you do that you can do go into Kuzan on the next turn. So you could also do like some other stuff. You can run like the event card that ramps you 1 as well. So on turn 7 you can use that instead of like this Sakazuki if you want to, and get that ramp. But the fact that you go ramp up 1, so you go first, you ramp up 1 to get up to 10, and then you can go from there. So you're going to be at 10 when your opponent last turn had 8 Dawn, which means whatever they played that last turn, even if it's a big 8 drop, you can still KO with Z, which is very strong. So that's the whole idea of the deck. You'd have to be really defensive. Don't hit them early. Don't give them more resources, and then just kind of go from there. So it's a hard deck to master, but it's very fun. I really enjoy this deck. So lastly, though, we are going to talk about Smoker, which is probably generically a better deck. At least it has 5 life, and as you saw, like even like we don't have a lot of purple cards in this, and it's mostly just for ramp and queen, because queen's like the best purple card we got. But we do have this. I think this is more of a conservative like way to build black in this game anyway. So Smoker, he has an alright effect, just Dawn ×1 activate main, give up to one of your opponent's characters -1 to their cost, and this gains plus 1k if there's a cost of 0. So it becomes a 7k during the main, which is okay. It's just kind of like, it's a small amount of value. It doesn't really do anything besides gain like a boost every once in a while, but that's usually okay for these 5 life leaders. And then this is just kind of like a toolbox for like just good black cards in the set. So ones that we weren't running in Z are just, we have some blockers. We have actually 2 2-drop blocker targets for this if we want it. We do have like the Helmepo. I'm never going to say that right the first time. Give something -3 to their cost for the turn, which can like bounce together with Smoker if you want. We have Kobe on play. You can trash 1 card of your hand, KO to 1 card with a cost of 3 or less, which means that if you are on turn 4 because you went second, your opponent played something with 3, you can use the effect of Smoker to reduce the cost of something by 1, and then you can use this to so if they played a 4 cost or just anything of that. I mean, I guess this is if you go first and you have 5 done, right? You can do that and use Smoker effect and this together to pop it, which is nice. Tashigi, kind of the same thing, give something -2k. It's a super counter. It's just fine for what it is. Hina as well, on play give something -4k, which you can boost together with some other things. Kuzan's still a really good card, especially since it gives something -4 when attacking. Then you can use Smoker effect. Borsalino, Hina we talked about. Monkey D. Garp is just like a slightly worse version of Sakazuki, but you get to play it a turn earlier if you go first, so that's kind of nice. But both of them KO something with cost of 5 or less. This just has to be 4 or less, and you have to trash a card, and it's you have to rest the card as well, so your opponent can attack into it. This is better, but it's just like the turn you play it, and not every turn. So, and then we're playing Kuzan, of course. Impact Wave, which we didn't talk about a lot in Z, is really strong as a card, giving something +4k and popping a 3 or less and having a really good trigger. Like, this is like one of the best cards that black has, so make sure you don't sleep on that card. And if your opponent has 2 Dawn open, be careful to maneuver around that. And also Meteor of Volcano, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 1 or less. So obviously if you have Kuzan out, that just means if it has a cost of 6 or less, and then if you use your leader ability of 7 or less for a 2 cost card is really good there too. So obviously there's a lot of bricky cards in this, but we also have a lot of effects that discard cards from our hand, which, I mean, if they're useless in our hand anyways, at least they have a purpose for it. But don't be too worried about that. We can kind of fix our hand with doing that, and that's that. So here are all my lists. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys are looking forward to set 2. Let me know what other leaders you want to maybe have me revisit. I have a Luffy build that I've been working on for a little bit with some new cards. I'll probably drop that next week. But if you guys have anything else you want from me, from decks or gameplay or anything, let me know and I'll try to do my best. So again, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you making it this far in the video, and that's going to be it. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.